As I'm sure all of you are aware by this point, the next generation of home consoles is hastily approaching, and with the holiday 2020 launch expected, rumors and speculation are starting to kick up like wildfire across the internet. This particular rumor I found on GameRant.com, link below in the description, has the potential to change my perspective on PlayStation 5 and perhaps even yours too. This particular rumor speculates that the PlayStation 5's backwards compatibility may not just be limited to PlayStation 4 and its accompanying PlayStation VR titles, but will be fully backwards compatible with PlayStation's entire history of PlayStation games going back to the PlayStation 1. This rumor started from a tweet made by Twitter user PS Erebus, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, at the end of September, which recommended that players should not sell, trade in, or dispose of any of their original PlayStation games, PlayStation 2, or PlayStation 3 titles. While of course you should take this comment with a massive boulder of salt and treat it with the utmost skepticism, this particular user does have a history of leaking PlayStation-related information, including the recently revealed Last of Us Part 2 release date. On top of that, another comment from a Vice journalist named Patrick Klepek added fuel to the fire by making this statement. Everything I've heard about the PlayStation 5, this is going back a full 2 years now, has been a huge emphasis on history. And that's going to be the sort of thing where it's not just about the future, but also about the past. That means your ability to play lots of those games. Now, these two journalists, this journalist and this Twitter user, they could be lying, they could be misled, they could be mistaken. At this point, nobody but Sony and their engineers and the marketing teams know what the PlayStation 5 is truly going to be capable of. At all, in terms of graphical processing, in terms of specifications, price points, features, you name it. Nobody out there truly knows unless they have secret insider information. With that being said, though, I am sort of, stuck in between the middle of this being a possibility and it not, because I could see it being positive for one reason. The PlayStation 5 will mark the 25th anniversary of Sony Interactive Entertainment's run in the home console business. It's crazy to think, but PlayStation has been around for 25 years. And what better way to celebrate such a landmark occasion by not only launching a next generation home console, but launching it and celebrating that history by allowing all of that history to be played in one box. So from that perspective, it'd be a brilliant marketing move. I can only imagine, I could see the commercials now as Sony advertises, play the past, play the present, and the future, blah, blah, blah. And as you not only buy your next generation PS5 games and your upcoming PSVR 2 games, but, pop in your old PS1, PS2, or PS3 games and watch them as they look, upscaled and to native 4K at high frame rates and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I could see that being a huge marketing coin for Sony, because other than Nintendo, I mean, those two companies have a huge catalog of games that just many players associate with their childhoods, their teens, and adult years. I mean, the problem is that none of these console manufacturers really care about their history. So if you could find a way to tap into that nostalgia factor and make it part of your present day, marketing ploys, your current generation consoles as well, that could be a huge selling point for people like me that still have their PS1, PS2, and PS3 games. I don't get rid of games. I keep them, and I keep the hardware as well, because I've always had this mentality that having a system that's backwards compatible that just plays the games isn't really worth it to me. But if Xbox One X has shown me anything, is that if the system is backwards compatible, but it enhances and upscales the games to support higher pixel counts and frame rates and effects, then you can damn well bet that I'm going to play my old games on my new system, because there's going to be an advantage to doing that. It's not just running the games pixel for pixel, frame for frame on the hardware. It's enhancing it. And so if Sony Interactive Entertainment could find a way to make the PlayStation 5 fully backwards compatible with PlayStation's entire catalog of games going back to 1994 and enhance them, day one buy for me. And I now have a way to play my old games without having to use the original hardware and wear that down. Because let's face it, these old systems they're aging, parts aren't available anymore, and as time progresses, which it likes to do, you're not going to be able to keep repairing these things unless you keep scavenging parts from other systems. The only conflicting thing I'm seeing, though, is theoretically a fully backwards compatible PlayStation 5 system would undermine Sony's investment in the Gaikai infrastructure that they turned into PlayStation Now, the streaming service. And with the price cuts that they've recently announced, basically cutting the price of the service in half, I think it's safe to say that Sony's going to be really pushing PlayStation Now as a way to play games for next generation home consoles, but having a backwards compatible PlayStation 5 would basically undermine that operation completely, because why pay to stream it if you could just go buy the disc and play it that way? Now, I understand not everyone's going to be rolling out to their local swap meets, mom and pop game shops, etc. to go buy old games, but I mean, I don't know. You see, I feel like a backwards compatible PlayStation 5 offers a lot of pros, but does have a significant con. The other, I guess you'd say, major point of concern that I have would be emulating the PlayStation 3, because if you don't know, the PlayStation 3 ran on a very proprietary architecture called the Cell Broadband Engine architecture, which is a joint venture between IBM and Sony, and it was a nightmare for developers to program for. There's a reason third-party games always looked worse on the PlayStation 3, because developers didn't even bother to learn it, which they couldn't be blamed. It was very complex, very different. It was basically like multi-core processing, but you had one core and 8 synergistic processing units to offset certain tasks to. It was interesting the way some developers managed to take advantage of it. I mean, some people were able to offset graphics processing from the weak RSX chip to the Cell. It was a clusterfuck of coding and manipulation that was required to get games to look as good as they did. But if you did your homework, games could look amazing, and Last of Us, especially for its time, is a perfect example of that. However, back on track, if developing for Cell was a nightmare, I can only imagine what developing an emulator for the Cell Broadband Engine architecture is like. Now, there is one that exists right now. I believe it's called RPCSX or something like that, or PS3X. It's a PlayStation 3 emulator that requires not really a high-end PC, but a mid to high-end PC to run the games. If you want them running in 4K or with high frame rates, then yeah, you're going to need, like an i9 or an i7 to i9 processor with, I believe they said, like a 1080 GTX 1080 to run that in 4K. But the point is that to get the games to run at high frame rates on PC requires a modest to high-end PC to do it. And I'm not sure how Sony's going to be able to do this with a PlayStation 5 system, because I know they're not going to include Cell architecture in a next-gen system. They don't make those chips anymore, and they're not going to start production again just to make the system backwards compatible, which only leaves software emulation as an option. So there's a lot to take in with this rumor. It could be completely false. I'll be the first to say that. But with a landmark of 25 years of business, Sony would be stupid to ignore all of that history, since that falls right in line with a next-generation home console launch. So, with all that being said, what are your thoughts down there in the comment section? If the PlayStation 5 launched fully backwards compatible with all PlayStation's history of games, would you buy it day one? Would you be playing some of those older games on it? Let me know what you think down there in the comment section. And as always, I will see you in the next video. But until then, take care.